All right. How you doing? Feeling good? Filled up with the Spirit? All right, so let's get to it. I'm doing great. Functioning in my maximum handsomeness, so I'm working it. If you have a family member who has been or is currently in the military, raise your hand, please. Many times, we don't acknowledge and address the people who are left behind. The mothers, the fathers, the children, the siblings, the friends who send their loved ones in the line of danger. So I want to not just acknowledge the veterans, but the people whose lives are impacted by their loved ones being a part of the military and protecting the ideals of this nation. And I also want to acknowledge for those whose friends or family members didn't have the opportunity to come back. I want to acknowledge their sacrifice, and God bless them and their families. Thank you. So we're in the series, Quit. Reverend Wells began this series last week. It's based on a book that will be available early next year by our CFO, Dr. Stanley Robertson, who you met last week. He's back there somewhere. The basic premise of the book is that to really achieve success, there are some things you need to quit. Last Sunday, Reverend Wells taught on how to know when it's time to quit. You know that if you miss a time, you can allow yourself to be in an experience way too long. Knowing when it's time to quit is as important as it is to know when to start something. So today I'm going to be talking about the step 2, which is understand negative emotions, how to deal with the shame associated with quitting. I want us to have an honest experience today. In other words, we're going to have real talk. Is that okay? All right. Because there's no breakthrough without real talk. It takes a lot of energy to be phony and pretend like nothing affects you emotionally. Like you, I know what it means to struggle with my emotions when a decision to quit or keep going forward is demanding an answer. Some people in this church today, low-key, are wrestling with staying in a marriage. You're torn between wanting your peace of mind and honoring your marital commitment. Real talk. There are people in this church who want to leave a relationship or quit a job or let go of some so-called friends, but your emotional attachment is too strong. Real talk. There are some people in this room who have done everything they could have done for an alcohol or drug-addicted relative or friend. And even though they are pulling you down into the pain of addiction with them, you're still holding on to them for dear life. Real talk. I'm not talking about something I wrote in a sermon. I know what I'm talking about. Some people in this church are still waiting on someone to keep their word when you know that they are habitual liars who can't be counted on, and you would rather remain delusional than address the feelings around releasing that individual from your life. Much like a punch-drunk boxer or the over-the-hill football player or the basketball player who was 2 steps too slow, Many times we are the last ones to see or acknowledge that it's time to do something else. I'm not going to leave you in this type of space, but I need to address the elephants in your room if we're going to heal them. If you desire to be all that God designed you to be, there are some thoughts, beliefs, identities, and even occupations you must quit. Moses quit being a prince of Egypt and then quit being a shepherd to become the liberator of Israel. Jesus' disciples gave up being fishermen and tax collectors and other occupations so they could become the promoters of the gospel. Saul gave up being a persecutor of the early church so he could become the Apostle Paul. If you want to take your life to another level, learn to quit to who you were so you can become something new, fresh, and transformative. So, let's start. How do we do this? First of all, let's break it down. My first point is this. Your point of view will determine how you work through quitting. Your point of view is determined by your beliefs. A point of view is a particular attitude or way of considering a matter. It is also the position from which something is observed. Your beliefs about life determine what is so for you, what you will do, and what you won't do. It doesn't necessarily have to be true. Because a belief is something that you accept as true. It is not the truth. It is not factual. But once you accept a belief, it is true for you. I want you to get it. Once you accept a belief, it is true for you. Now, this is what I really want you to get, because this is where the camel goes through the eye of the needle. The belief does not have to begin with you. Most of the time, the beliefs that we hold in our minds do not originate with us. Many times we are recycling the beliefs that have been given to us by the world. This is why Jesus said, I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world. Oh, you've heard that before. Everyone should investigate their beliefs. Why do I believe this? Much like the woman who went to her mother and said, why do you all cut the meatloaf at the third and put it in the oven? So I don't know. Let's go ask my mom. Grandma, why do you cut the third of the meatloaf off and put it in the oven? I don't know. That's how my mama taught me. Let's ask your great-grandmother. And then she says, oh, my pan was too small, so I would just cut it off and put it in the oven. Now, many times in life, we're doing things just because they have been passed down to us. This is the way it should be done. This is how we do it. So we walk around with these identities that are based upon male and female, based upon religion, based upon west side, south side, and all type of nonsense. Based upon what side of the track you're born on. Based upon things that don't matter to your success. So it's important to recognize that there is no transformation without the renewing of the mind. Why? Because it is said in Romans chapter 2, do not be conformed by this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your what? Of your what? Of your what? So without a renewed mind, there is no transformation. People are looking to create transformation by staying the same. Change is not transformation. Change is me putting a gray suit on instead of a black suit. Transformation is a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Do you want transformation in your life? Then you need to know how to quit. So, Steve Zaffron and Dave Logan wrote, "How people perform correlates to how situations occur to them." They also wrote, "How a situation occurs includes your view of the past, why things are the way they are, and the future. Where's all this going?" So I believe that the reason why a lot of people don't quit what they need to quit is because they're being dictated to by their past, and they have a default future that they're living into. Does this make sense? So in other words, based upon where we have been, we are determining where we are going and what we will do. That's not an empowered life. That's not a transformed life. And when we allow that to happen, what ends up happening for us many times is we create our own anxiety, we create our own frustration, we create our own fears because we won't get out of our own way. Please remember, we're never dealing with facts or truth most of the time. We're only dealing with our point of view, which determines how we see life. In the context of quitting, if we have a belief that quitters never win, we will associate massive pain to the mere thought of quitting. Why? Because we have too much emotional attachment to the things we want to see work. Too much emotional attachment. So, if you believe that winners never quit, then you don't realize something about massive success. And that is this. Anybody that you will ever study who has been massively successful is never successful in more than two things. Massively successful. I didn't say good at a lot of stuff. All right? Michael Jackson was a great singer and dancer. He struggled with other stuff. Prince, great songwriter, musician, and singer, right? A little eccentric. Love Prince, I'm just saying. Michael Jordan, great at basketball, not so good at baseball. He's still struggling with this ownership thing, too. Just saying, love you, Mike, but you know. Oprah Winfrey. Oprah's great at being Oprah. She's not trying to be somebody else. If you study success, what you will discover is that somebody has put their all into being who they are, which means you are saying no to other things that are good so you can accomplish your great. If you want to be great at something, you have to quit other stuff. We pride ourselves on being able to handle so much stuff. When I was a kid, they used to have this commercial where it was like a superwoman. She's like, I bring home the bacon. It was like a, what was it called? Charlie. I bring home the bacon, and she was doing all this stuff, frying up in the pan. You're right. And we were promoting this belief that a successful woman has to be able to handle 12 things at one time. While the pressure of that belief was crushing them. I'm just keeping it real. You have to free yourself so you can hear what God is seeking to do in your life. Now, pick up your bulletins. It's a scripture reading on here from Romans chapter 7, verse 15. It says, I do not understand my own actions, for I do not what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Have you ever wanted to do something and did something else that wasn't for your highest good? Testify. Testify. Have you ever knew something was wrong or not good for you and you did it anyway? It's perplexing. Why is it perplexing? Because we aren't honest enough with ourselves to investigate why we feel the way we do concerning certain behaviors. Can I talk about a few of them? All right? We say we want to pay our bills on time, but we do something else. They're like, he going from preaching to meddling. This is practical Christianity. We know we shouldn't shop until we drop, but we do it anyway. We know we don't need to spend all our money in the streets, but we do it anyway. We know we're getting too close to him or her, knowing that we're attracted to them, even though we are married, but we drive right through all the warning signs. Yeah, I went there. We know we lose money most of the time at the casino, but we go anyway. We don't want to admit we like the emotional high, even at the cost of our financial well-being, even the financial well-being of people that you're connected to, because they have to pick up your slack when you mess up. We know we should eat better and exercise, but we eat cake before bed and sit on the couch. Keep going. I'm going to get to you sooner or later. We know we need to put the cigarettes down because we know what is happening to our lungs, and we do it anyway. We know the doctor says stay away from the liquor, but you push through anyway, even if the abuse is literally destroying your internal organs. Nobody's doing this in 2018 without knowing the consequences. We pretend like we don't know because we don't want to address the negative emotions that are holding us to these things. So let me just say, CUT, in love, any person who can't control their actions is a slave to their own emotions, habits, addictions, and appetites. The reason why you can't quit is because you don't have control over your own mind. If you want life to be radically different, you must control your own mind. Monte, when people show up, Monte's playing the piano, and we show up at the funerals, and people walk up, first of all, giving honor to God who's the head of my life. How is God the head of your life if you can't control your mind? You can't give your life to God if you can't stop doing what you don't want to do. Jesus had a word for that. You know what his word was? Not Gaylon McDowell's, because I love you. But Jesus' word was hypocrite. Hypocrite. Because you're saying something. This is why it says in Isaiah, Jesus quoted it, your lips proclaim me, but your heart is far from me. God can't be the head of your life with addictions running your behavior. God can't be the head of your life when you let the man abuse you. God can't be the head of your life when you let your grown children who should be out of the house run you. They're your gods, not God. Y'all gonna let me back up here, right? Okay, just double checking. Why? Because I believe in radical empowerment. Radical empowerment. Never let nobody, anyone, take your power away from you. And we don't want to admit at times that we play the role, and if you play a role, somebody's going to show up for your play. If you play the victim, you must have a victimizer. There is no such thing as a victim without a victimizer. So when you walk around with a victim mentality, you are asking the universal laws of God to present to you a victimizer. Because you can't be a victim without one. This is why we tell you to walk around proclaiming, I'm a rich child of an abundant father. My body is healthy. Every cell, muscle, and tissue is working in divine order with the vitality of God. My mind is imbued with the wisdom and understanding of God. I have more than enough life, energy, and enthusiasm to do anything that God has created me to do. But when we want to walk around and talk about what he or she ain't doing, you can't be in your power and into your victimhood at the same time. I'm not belittling what you've been through. I'm saying you know better now. That happened then. So the question is, do you want to be free? If you want to be free, there's some stuff you got to quit. We having real talk here today, y'all. Real talk. My next point is what the author of the book calls approach and avoidance goals. Approach goals involve trying to achieve a desired outcome when you know what you want and it is clear that the outcome is wanted and desirable. That's an approach goal. In other words, you see it, it's desirable, you want it, that's an approach goal. What's an avoidance goal? An avoidance goals focus on avoiding an undesired consequence. When you're trying to avoid pain, negative consequences, or undesired outcome. Let me give you a biblical example. 2 Samuel chapter 11, avoidance goal. King David was supposed to be leading the army of Israel in war, but he was home in the palace. If you read the beginning of the chapter, it says, at the time of the season or the year when kings go to war. Back in the day, in biblical times, if you were a king and you went to war, you were leading the war. I think that war would be different today if the presidents and prime ministers had to go. Side note, let's see how bad you are now with your talk. I think the veterans understand what I'm saying for real. But he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Instead, he was walking around the palace and he saw Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, bathing. He sent his men to retrieve her and he slept with her. even though he knew it was Uriah's wife. She sent word to David that she was pregnant. Now, it's already bad. But remember I said an avoidance goal is when you're trying to avoid a negative consequence. So he went to try to cover it up. Have you ever messed up and you try to cover it up? Yeah, that's an avoidance goal. You're trying to avoid a negative consequence. So David pulls Uriah from the front line of the battlefield so he can go home and be intimate with his wife. But Uriah refuses because his soldiers couldn't come home to be with their families. He was a leader in the military. To avoid a scandal, David had Uriah put on the front line and then made the soldiers withdraw so that he would be killed. Now here's the key. David wasn't where he was supposed to be. He should have quit walking around the palace and go lead his military. David was acting like a peeping Tom and saw Bathsheba bathing. He should have quit. When he found out she was another man's wife, he should have quit. When he got her pregnant, he should have quit. In other words, own your stuff. But he kept going, trying to avoid an embarrassing outcome until a man had to die to save his reputation. What is my point? People will go to extremes so they won't have to deal with the mess they create because they don't understand the emotions that are driving their behavior. The same man who wrote the 23rd Psalm did that. How do you deal with the fact that this man who walked in the anointing of the Lord could do this type of despicable act? It's because our negative emotions drive behavior that sometimes we don't understand. So instead of getting to the place of understanding, and hear this key, if you don't hear anything else from this lesson, understand this. Attraction is not choice. You can't help who you are attracted to. But first lady, you can help what you do with that attraction. I know that doesn't sound whatever, but get it. But because he didn't understand, just because something in him said go, doesn't mean you had to go. You have to have the ability to stop yourself before you play yourself. If not, you will start to try to connive and manipulate situations to avoid the very mess you've created. Does that make sense? Next point that Dr. Robertson talked about was the danger of throwing good money after bad. Dr. Robertson wrote in the book, throwing good money after bad is a metaphorical description of spending more money in a futile attempt to recover one's original investment. In essence, it is a hopeless attempt to recoup a previous loss by incurring further losses. If that's not the casino, I don't know what is. But anyway, I just need to get this $300 back. Why do I mess with the casino? Because casino people are the best tithers. You all make sure they have great buildings and their bathrooms and restaurants and everything in them. And put $3 in an offering basket for something that transforms your life. Every time they go, they get hundreds of dollars. Yeah, I said it. Because it's the truth. Churches go out of business every day. When's the last time you heard a casino going out of business? Knowing that the house always wins. Only part, Reverend Cook gonna get me after this sermon. She knows why. We don't like to lose. There are times in life where acceptance is the necessary state of mind needed to give you peace, forgiveness, and release. Just because something worked in the past is no guarantee that it will work the same way now or in the future. Growth requires innovation, creativity, transformation, and newness. This is why 2 Corinthians 5:17 states it this way. There, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. Let go of the old and embrace God's new possibilities for your life. I got to move on. Next point is entrapment theory. Is a form of conflict escalation where one continues with tunnel vision on a path that is failing in order to justify or make good on a prior investment. He goes on to say, conflict escalation occurs when an individual is faced with an increasingly negative outcome from a decision. But because of their previous commitment, they maintain irrational behavior that aligns with the previous action rather than alter course. So let me just say this. Don't let your past define you. Don't dig into a mistake just because you've been doing it a long time or you've been putting money into it. Don't dig into a past mistake just because you've put so much energy and time and you have wrapped your identity around it. One of the statements that we say here at Christ Universal Temple is one of our statements of faith is we believe that learning to listen to the whisperings of the still small voice will ensure that we are guided into right action. If you're digging your heels into your emotions, you're not listening to the whisperings of the still small voice. I can guarantee it. Because God is not going to shout over your internal noise. Does this make sense? All right. Next point. The sunken cost fallacy is a concept where an individual makes an emotional investment to continue down a particular course of action based on the amount of resources they have previously invested. So let me give you a couple of quick examples, really quick. Tony Robbins tells a story about a woman that was at his date for destiny one day, and she jumped up, and he was talking about you got to change your blueprint or change, which is change your mental state, or you have to change how you accept the thing. In other words, you either take the action or you change your mind around it. And a woman jumped up, what are you trying to say? Am I just supposed to accept that my boyfriend won't leave his wife? Keeping it real. She goes on to say that she had been invested for 15 years with a man who keeps promising to leave his wife. But it's the children, it's the family, it's the money and whatever. And he said, Tony Robbins says, okay, well, you only have two things. Well, one, you can take different actions. Like literally cut it and end it. I love him. I can't live without him. Okay, then you got to change your blueprint. I'm not saying it's ethical. And then you got to accept what is. He's not going to leave her and you the side chick. It's one or the other. So she debated with him because she didn't understand her negative emotions because of her prior time, energy, money, and investment emotionally. She couldn't pull out. So she was in hell and thought it would be a greater hell to leave. What do you do when it's painful when you're in it and you think it's going to be more painful if you go? That's hell. Because the mind is stuck. And you got to learn to free yourself. We got to cover some other stuff. Quick point I want to give on this is biblically this story is told in the book of Jonah. When you get a chance to read it. Jonah, by the way, for those who don't know, is not a historical figure. It's an allegory in the Bible. All right? It's told to deal with radical nationalism that was happening in Israel in that era. But Jonah decided that he was going to do everything other than what he was supposed to do because he was invested in only Israel having the love and grace of God, nobody else. God says, go to Nineveh, tell them about my grace so they can repent. Okay, God, I'm going to get on the boat and go the other way. Have you ever been told spiritually to do something? You knew it was God, and you did something else anyway. So what ended up happening? They ended up going into a storm. People are panicking. He's down there in the bottom of the boat chilling because he don't want anybody to pay attention that he's the reason why the storm is happening. Have you ever been around folks or you've been that person where you create the storm and then you try to pretend this ain't the mess you created? They throw him overboard into the mouth of a giant fish, not a whale, a fish, which I can get into the symbolism of, but I don't have time of right now. And even after that, he goes to Nineveh, whispers, because he don't want people to really understand God's grace. So he barely does what he needs to do, and then he goes and he sits under a large plant, and then overnight it died, and then he blames God. The one thing I wanted to do, you even took that away, because his identity, his emotions, his point of view were all wrapped into a limited theological point of view, which did not allow him to fulfill the role of prophet. He needed to quit to who he thought he was so God could be fresh and new in him. We do the same, and we create the consequences of our lives because we don't want to listen. Next point. Jesus taught us to quit. He said, but Jesus said to them, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. Why is that important? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? You got to let the past handle the past. It's time for you to go forward. Jesus also said, if anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet and leave that house or town. We want to convince. We want to make people understand. We want to make people do what we want them to do. That's not the Jesus Christ way. He said, shake the dust from your feet. A person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. Jesus also said, do not give what is holy to dogs, and do they not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you? In other words, if you have people in your life who can't appreciate your awesomeness, they got to go. Jesus taught us to evaluate. He said, a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a good tree bear bad fruit. Is Jesus talking about fruit? No, fruit is a metaphor. What type of results do certain types of thoughts, feelings, words, and actions produce? Judge your decisions. Judge your point of views. Judge your beliefs. Judge your actions by the fruit they bear. Jesus went on to say, every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits. So Jesus is saying, if the belief doesn't work, it's supposed to go to the fire. We want to keep it around as decoration. We think that the dead fruit, the dead tree is going to be resurrected. No, it won't. It's time for the fruit. In other words, take the energy one of the things that we understand about the world of matter is nothing is lost in matter. So if you burn a tree, the flame turns into something else that the universe can use. That energy that you're using to maintain a life that you don't want can be transmuted and used to create the life you desire. Let me give you your homework really quickly. First thing, make a list of 5 things you need to quit right now. Don't try to quit everything. 5 things. All right? Number 2, write down why you haven't been able to quit in the past. Be honest with yourself about it. Okay? Be honest. Number 3, write down what new possibilities and opportunities are available for you once you quit what you don't need in your life. So you got 5 things. You're going to write down why you didn't quit them, and then you're going to write down what's possible once you quit it. Number 4, quit one thing at a time every 21 days until you're done. In other words, you got to build your muscle. I can't go to LA Fitness and just deadlift 700 pounds. I'm not prepared for it. And many of us aren't prepared to handle 5 issues at one time. Deal with one. Last point. Call the CUT prayer ministry or a dedicated prayer partner to pray with you to release, let go, and let God for the first 21 days for momentum. In other words, you got to build some momentum behind this practice. So as I close, quitting is hard. And one of the most challenging things that we deal with when it comes to quitting is around our loved ones. I've only told this story once publicly from the platform. When I was in my mid-20s, my grandfather, Wilmore Stewart, was suffering from Parkinson's disease. And my grandmother, Emma, was a praying woman. And as my grandfather got weaker and more stiff, anybody's ever dealt with that, your mind is fine, but your body doesn't work. And as this went on for a couple of years, he got to the point where he couldn't move, he couldn't take care of himself, he couldn't clean himself, he couldn't feed himself, he couldn't do anything. A proud man. And I went to my grandmother. I was probably 24 maybe. And I said, Granny, you got to let him go. He's staying here because of you. You all have been married for 60 years, and I understand that life without him being around is beyond your comprehension, but he's suffering. She's like, boy, shut up and get out of my face. That was literally a response. And she never talked to me like that. But that's how deep it was. So we ended up at Mercy Hospital one night on a really bad night because I would always get him when he had issues and drive him to the hospital my grandmother wanted him to go to. And my sister Lisa, who was on the front row, my mother and my grandmother, we were all in the room with my grandfather, and it wasn't looking good. And they all walked out. And I said to my grandfather these words. I said, you've been a man in this house and this family for a long time. And I'm not telling you to go. But if you want to go, I'll be the man of the family. I'll take care of your ladies, which was my mother, my sister, and my grandmother. If you want to go, I'll take care of them. You'll never have to worry about that. If I have it, they have it. And again, he couldn't talk. And my sister and my grandmother and my mother came back in the room, and with the last bit of strength he had, he reached his hand and it was shaking because he could barely move it. And he said 2 words. And he hadn't spoken in months. He said, bye-bye. I gave him permission to quit. In less than 10 hours, he was gone. He had made his transition. And I feel the blessing of allowing a strong man to leave with his dignity, knowing that he raised children that would continue what he taught them. So I'm saying to you today, give for people in your life permission to release. If you're having, and I know this is tough, and I'm saying something that's really tough. If you're wrestling with a loved one right now that might be wrestling with that, give them permission to go. It's okay. Underneath are the everlasting arms. If somebody has already made their transition in their lives and you're still holding on to it because you can't imagine and still can't imagine life without them, give yourself the permission and the love to go forward. Give them what they would want for you. Quit. Release. Let go and let God. Allow God to guide you through, but it won't work until you surrender. So my request for you today is this. As you quit all the other stuff, be a big boy or a big girl. Trust God and give it all to the Spirit of goodness. Release, let go, and let God. God bless you.